Welcome to Football Unspoken, the home of unique football takes.
How's it, Josh? So I've got a real debate for you today. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on it. But before I do, I'm going to go with our customary trivia question. And I was going to ask you, can you tell me which season since records began had the most ball in play time?
Just a clarification, I'm assuming this season doesn't count because the season hasn't ended yet.
Yeah, no, we're not counting this season. And I'll give you a hint. Records only began in the 2012-2013 season.
Okay, that does help me because I would have gone for an earlier season than that. I'm going to go 2020, like the COVID season, whichever was the COVID season.
That's not a bad shout. Not a bad shout, but no, the best one was actually 2013-2014 with 56 minutes and 43 seconds in play.
That's very high because I know last season they dropped down to like 42 minutes or something like that last season.
Some games did, yeah. So it averaged out at about 52. But this is where I'm going to bring in my question. So there's been a big influx of injuries this season. But also this season, we've had the most ball in play time at 59 minutes and 3 seconds, as well as the most average amount of play time in total at over 100 minutes. Is the average ball in play time, this stat that's being bandied about, is that actually ruining the kind of spectacle of football by injuring these better players and not allowing teams to play their full team on a weekly basis?
So I think there's three main caveats to this question within the rule changes or what's been happening in football over the last few years. So first of all, you have more ball in play time, which is meaning that players are playing at the same intensity or they're trying to for longer duration with less rest in between. There's also longer injury times this season in the Premier League. So instead of being 3 or 4 minutes, we've seen, it's not that common, but we are seeing 10 minutes here, 12 minutes there in exceptional cases. And across a season, even if it's 2 minutes each half, so 4 minutes a game, 4 times 38 matches is what, 150, 160 probably by the end of it, minutes extra a season, which is nearly an extra 2 matches a season that players play. You couple that with changes like next season, for example, the Champions League format is changing. And that there's been lots of these examples, not just Champions League.
Newcastle last season had some of the worst ball in play time. I think theirs was down at around about that 49-minute mark.
And it was close to five minutes less than your Man Cities and your Arsenals. But now they've obviously come into this new season and they've now had the most amount of injuries. I will say not all of them have been muscular. You've also had Tonali suspended. There's been Harvey Barnes with a broken foot. There's stress fracture at a back for Elliot Anderson. Another back fracture for Dan Burns. So obviously all hasn't been muscular and not necessarily due to the extra play minutes. But you can see that it's definitely having an impact on these teams that like to play high press, high intensity, because they don't get the break. And the one thing for me, I would potentially like to get your opinion on as well, is for me, it's almost forcing everyone to play this Man City, Arsenal, possession-dominated, not really pressing, kind of trying to control the ball and keep it in play for as long as possible style of play. And you're starting to lose the Jurgen Klopp press, the Eddie Howe press, these teams who are really physically in your face and able to actually get out to you because they don't get the rest time. And I personally think that's a real detriment to football. And I'd like to know if you think that's if you have a similar opinion.
It's really interesting that you brought up the Liverpool example because that's where I was going to go next with it. I was just going to say, a lot of people have said, so last year Liverpool had a big fall off, right? And it was happening. And I think a lot of people said, they just had a bad year. Not a problem. They get back on the horse terror doing Liverpool things. But I think when you dissect it more heavily, you realize Liverpool actually changed the way they played in the last season or two. They weren't playing that high press way. And I think you're right. They've been starting to get exposed. Like last season, you saw them getting exposed a lot trying to play in that way. And it actually changed tactic this season. You look at, we had an episode quite a few weeks ago about the midfield that won the Premier League with Liverpool. And you think Wijnaldum, Fabinho, Henderson is a very different midfield three to Szoboszlai. Trying to think who would it be now? It would be
McAllister,
McAllister, and the third one?
Endo, and Endo.
Exactly. That's a very different midfield three, and they offer very different strengths and weaknesses compared to before. And actually, because we discussed that centre mid three, the old one really was the fundamentals to that Liverpool team in 2020 being able to do what they did, because they only defend, and then the fullbacks and the wingers and everyone else would just go forward, and those three would keep it solid in the middle. But it's not like that anymore. And to me, that shows me that Liverpool are more personally, Klopp has realized they can't just play in the same way. They've had to update their tactics. And to that point, they're not pressing as aggressively. Detriment to the league, I think it absolutely is. Like, to not be able to have high pressing intense teams anymore, because you can't maintain that intensity over 55 to 60 minutes of ball and play time is. When I say that's a pity, I don't mean not being able to maintain that intensity. It's a pity that because of the style of play, it's no longer effective. Your team will fall off by the end of the game. And so therefore, being a Man City Arsenal style, just controlling the game, controlling the ball, you'll wear down the opposition and win in the end is kind of not a very viewer-friendly style of football.
Yeah, I do agree. And I will say I'm gonna ask you one last kind of question to round us off today. But so currently, for the 23-24 season, we're currently at 3 minutes more than the peak, or the in terms of ball and play time. So we're 3 minutes more ball and play time this season so far. Has that added anything to the spectacle at all? Has there been any positivity to adding 3 extra minutes per game?
I can't say that I've noticed the ball and play time, but I have noticed obviously the extra injury time and having that added back. And I do think that's improved the game. One thing I was getting frustrated with last season was I don't mean to call out Newcastle for this, but it was part of their strategy, is that Newcastle was so good at delaying restarts and doing little things to do that. And we've seen that being cut out of the game of like people rolling around. I don't know about the diving necessarily, but like they've been fouled and they just stay down, because the time actually feels like it gets added on, or mostly gets added back on now.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think that there's an understanding now with the players that you can't be wasting that much time, especially in these dark arts ways, as how they used to call it. So I think that has been a positive overall. Personally, I think there's been a bit of a negative in the fact that you've got so many big players, not just for Newcastle, but Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, all these players, specifically ones who played in Europe, are struggling to make the whole season. But if you guys have anything you'd like to hear us discuss, if you liked what we were talking about, or if you entirely disagree, leave us a like, leave us a comment, share your thoughts on it. And until next time, this has been Football Unspoken.